All right, awesome. Thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody to our steering committee tonight. Again, we're going to do a focus round discussion on particular today about design, character, and preservation. I'm going to quickly share the agenda on my screen, but I'm going to turn it over to Yasmin from Puma. So she'll provide a quick update on a lot of the focus engagement efforts that they have been leading for us. So we won't dive into the substance of what we've been hearing tonight, but we'll focus that on June. But I did want to make sure that she provides a quick update, since I know a lot of people are curious on what's going on in that front as well. So,
hi everyone. Thank you for making it tonight. So there's basically two buckets kind of that we have going on with our focused engagement. Colorado Changemakers Collective, who you've all heard of before. And if any of you made it to the workshops in person in the neighborhoods, they were also there. There were two of them at each one. So we had them doing what we call intercept surveys. So on the official website, we have 4 different surveys that reflect the 4 different buckets of the plan. And people can take whichever ones that they want. We thought that it might be easier if we made the surveys 14 or 17 questions long, but the last 4 questions are optional because they have to do with demographic information. So basically we pulled 1 question from each of the sections and then added some additional ones relating to accessing social services, expanding further on quality of life. And we can share those results later with you in June once we finish closing out those surveys. But basically, we identified 6 priority areas where we wanted to deploy these surveys along the federal corridor, between the industrial area, both between Sunnyside and Chaffee Park. There's 6. So I don't know if Sung, you want me to pull up those different maps, but we can also do that in June, up to you. And so far, we've had 100, they're in English and Spanish, and CCC is taking tablets and going to each of these priority areas and explaining what the plan is and asking them to take these surveys if they have 10 minutes. And so the purpose for this is that we want, people who might not have access to internet to be able to take these, people who might not have time to take these surveys on their own, people who might not understand fully what the process is. So far we have 179 on the Spanish and about 100 on the English one. And so we have those intercept surveys running. And then we have something similar going on in Quig. So we have 2 connectors that are residents of Quig that were onboarded just a little bit later. And so we did some training with them about a month ago, and they also attended some of the workshops in the neighborhoods to get a sense of what traditional outreach looks like. They are conducting a Quig intercept survey, which is similar to the other survey that we have, but there's some questions that aren't as relevant and others that are. So we'll also share those results. And that survey closes on June 3rd. And then the other thing that we're doing with Quig is we have a workshop with them this week on the 26th. So we had, the 4 neighborhood workshops in each of them, but they're 3 hours long. They're a little bit intensive. Usually people who come to them know exactly what station they want to participate in, whether it's mobility or quality of life. And if you did each one of those, that would probably take you an hour each. So instead, for the workshop on the 26th, it's going to tail end off of a resident council meeting. And we met with them in the first phase. We'll meet with them in this phase. We'll meet with them in the next phase and in every phase of this process. So we're having a shorter, more condensed workshop where the first half we'll kind of talk about the project, review the issues and opportunity video, and then the second half will break out into small group discussions and do that. If you've seen the Sunnyside diagram, if you live in that neighborhood, there's questions that we asked everybody. So they will, Sunny, can we get a copy of the survey? Yeah, we can share those results once they close out. They're similar. I don't know how we want to present those in June. But yeah, that's a brief overview of some of the focused outreach. One thing I forgot to mention is that we had 2 street campaigns as well during this phase. The first one was tailored more towards businesses and a lot of the main corridors. So Ryan and my colleague Ryan and I went and took yard signs and flyers and stickers and just flyered and stickered everything. And then the second street campaign, CCC had bandwidth to assist us. So they did parks and revisited a lot of areas, and as well as some of their existing contacts. And that was helpful too, because they were able to just send the intercept survey and a link to a lot of those main organizations that they met during the street campaigns. But yes, now I think that's everything.
Great. Yeah, we could just take some questions, and it looks like Troop D might have one. She said, Troop D, are you asking about the copy of the survey because you're just interested in the questions being asked, or?
Yes, yeah. So I mean, the various, I don't know, I think there's 4 different surveys besides the one for businesses, the last piece, but I'm curious about the overlap. Are they exactly the same as the ones online? It sounded like they took one topic instead of, I don't know, that's where I was confused about what was covered on the Interceptor versus what was covered on the online ones that are available to everyone.
Yeah, so there are questions that are geared more towards issues that are going to affect low-income people and that are more vulnerable to displacement. So, okay. I mean, I can pull up I think I have the Quig one more readily available, but for example, the first question is, right, what neighborhood do you live in? For mobility, what is your main form of transportation? The options are the same as the traditional one. Questions around, are you aware of food banks in your area and charitable food services? Yes or no? Would you be interested in using those services? Yes or no? Listing, we have like a very long list of the different places where people can go to them. If people know which one, for us to know which ones are more popular versus others. Where do you get most of your groceries now? Those options are still the same. We added a couple different ones. The other one is what would increase your access to healthy food? Having more to do with mobility is what would increase how much you go to the park or access outdoor services. Let's see, we also have and
yes,
the last one.
It's okay, you don't have to go through all of them.
Okay.
When you said that the Interceptor surveys are geared more towards low income, that was helpful because I didn't understand. I thought this was just because we weren't getting enough participation either at the roundtables or the online surveys getting filled. But these were actually focused a little different. But either way, we don't have to go through those now.
Right.
I assume you'll share those with us, the questions and the stuff next month. That's fine.
Yeah, so basically the purpose of it is, right, people who don't have access to internet typically are also people who don't have access, to a tablet, maybe housing unstable. So if we want their feedback, it's going to be kind of hard, to find them. So the purpose of that was to go just directly to them and ask them to take them.
Thank you.
Dina, did you have a question? You have a hand up.
I do, on this same topic, on the survey. Did I mistakenly see something in that the survey asked for the residents of Quig if they rent or own their home? Like I saw something that I'm looking at, like question number 3, do you rent or own your home?
Yeah, that's on there.
Why are we asking the people who live in Quig if they rent or own their home when this is DHA housing?
Yeah, that's a good
catch. we amended the intercept survey that was focused on Spanish speakers and low income, so we will remove that.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions before we kind of move on?
I got one last one. So you made the comment that a lot of the folks who don't have internet, don't have tablets, you know, that's also true, you know, and then kind of made the leap that they are most likely on housing unstable. What about the older people who just don't have internet or are just not technical savvy? Are we still missing them then?
Yeah, I can quickly jump in there. So Puma is really taking a lead into focused engagement with the Promotoras and then also Quig Newton. We've identified some additional gaps in people who we need to engage, including, you know, people that are of an elderly population, and also people that are experiencing homelessness, and people that have disabilities. So we, the city right now, we're working with Mike Ramsey, our engagement specialist, to connect with some of those local organizations within Near Northwest to have a focused outreach effort with them as well. So those are something I was going to mention those at the end, but yeah, those conversations are being planned and will be had in kind of early mid-June as well.
Thank you.
All right, it seems like we don't have additional questions, so we could probably move on, Janie. If you want to share your screen, we could probably start the presentation.
Okay. Everybody see my screen okay? All right, I'm going to go into presentation mode. Well, let me, so the agenda tonight, we are talking about our final focus topic and design, character, and preservation. This is this similar agenda to all of the ones, well, the past three, where we'll give a presentation you guys have received and hopefully look through this so I can go a little bit faster, and then we'll go into small groups. We'll come back and report out and carry on. So I'm going to skip these first slides. We know where we are in the process. We know what the ground rules are and all that. So just to start here with the focus topics and remind you, so we've covered so far with the steering committee and the public and the focus groups. So we've had on these focus topics, we've had a public roundtable, a focus group, and the steering committee. So 3 meetings. And so we've done health and environment, completing green streets, and affordable housing and wealth building is completely covered. And we are analyzing feedback and as we move into draft recommendations. The final 2 is design, character, and preservation, which we'll talk about tonight. And then for the industrial areas, because the other topics had more of a far-reaching, you know, area-wide focus, the industrial areas are very geographically focused and topically focused, and so we're not going to have that conversation with the steering committee. Instead, we're going to have a detailed conversation with property owners and business owners in the industrial area. That's where we're going to focus our attention, because we feel like we need additional outreach. You all are invited. If you are interested in that topic, of course, let us know. That's going to happen in early June. Sung, I can't remember if we have an official date.
Yeah, I included at the end. We could mention
Okay.
the location there.
Okay, so we'll tell you more about that in a second. So tonight, we'll just run through design, character, and preservation focus topic. We've split this into two subtopics. First of all, residential neighborhoods, design and types of housing. And then number 2, mixed use neighborhoods, design and activation of our corridors and more commercial and mixed use areas. You guys have seen this before, but just as a reminder, in terms of land use and built form, as it relates to design, character, and preservation, these are likes, dislikes, and ideas. People love the historic homes and architectural diversity, the history. They dislike out of scale construction and demolition, overpriced apartments. Ideas included ADUs everywhere, encouraging new builds to be more in character, and finding a balance between, modernizing and realizing that contemporary architecture is, or not dictating style, but also preserving some of the character that people love. So residential neighborhoods. This is one of the key issues from the issues and opportunities summary is the loss of ethnic diversity, families, and culture. You guys have seen this chart again and again. We will continue to bring it up. And then traditional neighborhood building forms being replaced. So you've also seen this, but these are kind of what we're going to talk about tonight is, the small homes being replaced with the large, expensive homes and displacing populations. To get into some data and mapping. So the map on the right shows a pink outline. Those are single unit districts. Those are areas in the near Northwest that by zoning only allow one single family home to be built. Some of these areas, as you know, Chaffee Park also allows ADUs. So that doesn't count an ADU, but in other words, you can build one primary structure. And then some examples. So you can see architecturally in the near Northwest area in this zone, the black is the new construction in the last 20 years. Architectural variety leans towards contemporary. You see a lot of shed and flat roofs and this weird V. And then, some more contemporary or more traditional architecture as well. And then you move into the blue outlined areas, which is 2 unit districts. That means areas where you can have 2 or more primary structures. So that is where duplexes are allowed. Duplex forms are prominent in these areas. A lot more black happening in these areas. So new construction. And you guys all know the story. You walk around your neighborhood and you see them every day. But here are some pictures, again, of architectural variety or lack thereof. And finally, in red, these are traditional missing middle homes in the area. So there are a smattering of, and randomly placed all over Sunnyside and Highland. There are a lot of these, 2 to 6, even 8 unit development, small apartment buildings, to little row homes. So this is a traditional example of what we call as planners missing middle. These types of housing are rarely found in new construction, but there are some gems that exist in the neighborhood that are older. We also want to take the data from, where our historic places are. And so in blue, Potter Highlands is the only local historic district that is residential focused. And then down in Highlands, down here in the lower Highlands, there's 2 small local historic districts, and then River Drive in Jefferson Park. So essentially there's 4 local historic districts. Potter Highlands also has a conservation overlay. And then in dashed, the entire neighborhood of Sunnyside is has a proposed conservation overlay underway, and that was sponsored by Councilman Sandoval, and that is going through staff review right now and expected to be going through public review soon. And what that does is it in Sunnyside would, for new construction, it would reduce the height for flat roof structures. It would allow dormers to pop through. So really kind of incentivizing pitched roof structures with dormers to match that historic architecture, requiring a front porch, minimizing having a minimum percentage of brick, this is being discussed, and then maximum overall square footage, so shrinking the overall size of the home. In pink are areas that were identified by a historic context study that are areas of interest or may need additional research. We do have more information now from the historic Denver. Song helped me out with the name, but they just have done a complete historic survey of Sunnyside.
Mexican Chicano historic context study, and it's from CPD.
Thanks. Yeah, no, there's Discover Denver. Thank you. Discover Denver has surveyed Sunnyside neighborhood, and we now have a map and draft report from them about areas in Sunnyside that could be eligible. And then thank you also the Chicano Latino study has identified places as well. And that's this one. So this was recently completed, and we are looking at this study in addition to those historic contexts. We have some data. So this is the last week of the online survey, and I just checked today. So these are very fresh outcomes based on so far on our land use survey. So one of the questions was, what actions do you think will be most effective in preserving and increasing cultural diversity in our near Northwest neighborhoods? And you could select all that apply. And so, so far people are favoring supporting older culturally relevant businesses, providing housing options designed for multicultural, multi-generational families, and giving existing or past residents priority with community cultural celebrations and public art as a close fourth. So far, what are your primary concerns with the loss of traditional building forms? And we asked, and there were a variety of things to choose from. The top three are loss of architectural character, loss of affordable units, and loss of landscape and streetscape. What actions would you prioritize to address the loss of traditional neighborhood building forms? So far, people want to encourage new construction to include key features like front porches. So this is something that Sunnyside is currently, trying to draft and get passed. Close second, almost tied for a second, is making sure that the scale of new construction is consistent. Another thing that Sunnyside Overlay is trying to do, and preserve historic features of buildings and neighborhoods. We asked, the map that had the red dots, please indicate to the extent to which you agree that these types of housing should be preserved in the area. So you can see that people very strongly agree or somewhat agree that those older traditional forms of missing middle housing should somehow be preserved. And then just quickly go over we'll talk more about this in our small groups. We have more information, but this is sort of a highlight of topics and things that were discussed in our roundtable and focus group on this topic. So ADUs, allowing them everywhere. They're almost allowed everywhere. There's like a thin little line of Sunnyside North along 70 that doesn't allow it. Leaning on citywide projects underway. So there's there's the expanding housing affordability project, and there's the citywide ADU project underway. We can tell you more about those, but we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. Some things CPD is already working on citywide, and so we want to take advantage of those and then build on them to make unique recommendations for near Northwest. Incentivizing, allowing ownership of ADUs. So right now, it's typical that you would rent it, and the problem is people don't want to become landlords, and it takes a whole lot of equity and money to build one. So if you could sell it, it could be a way to make them more feasible. Continue to pursue incentives and creative options for financing them. looking at allowing ADUs on 25-foot wide lots. There's a lot of these in Highland, but there's a current rule that doesn't allow ADUs on these narrow lots. Deal with speculative development. So explore ways to make sure homes for sale go to full-time residents rather than corporations that may come in and flip and do it for a profit. Recognize the developer, and then also on the flip side of that, one in our focus group, someone said, well, we also need to recognize that developers are the ones building housing, and so just factor that in. Find a balance. Duplexes, we talked a lot about, the duplex form is the side-by-side form, and that's the form that creates these wide boxy structures that that sometimes don't fit in with the context. There's also a tandem house form available in the code, which basically allows a front house and a rear house. But nobody's taken advantage of that, but we think that form would better fit the character of the neighborhood and deal with some of these concerns, so we can explore that. We need to talk about Chaffee Park. It's a different housing stock, and we think it demands different solutions. It's smaller houses on bigger lots, so we'll talk about that. And then preserving character defining features. We talked a lot about discouraging demolition in general. It's and dealing with that in terms of sustainability and diverting from landfills. And so, and then also maybe something that we've looked at in previous NPIs is, an incentive to, if you save the primary structure, but maybe you add on to it, or you add a tandem house behind, or something like that. Maybe there's an incentive if you're saving part of the structure or the primary structure, that you get extra lot coverage or density to incentivize that. Okay, moving on to multi-unit and mixed-use districts. Some of the key issues were, you guys are all familiar with. We talked about this in the in-person workshops that I went to. This was a very hot topic. People are concerned that, there's not true mixed use being built in these neighborhoods. It's all 100% residential. And at the same time, we're losing some of our beloved neighborhood commercial. And so again, how do we find a balance, and where do you mandate commercial or not? So let's see, this map shows all of the in yellow, all of the mixed use zoning in the area, and then kind of behind that you can see where new development occurs. So there is, especially here's Tejon has seen a lot. Of course, Lower Highland has seen a lot of new development. Spear Boulevard is starting to see, Jefferson Park. So we need to, but some of these smaller quarters like 44th are just starting to see some of this, and that has brought up the concern, but it's not too late. It still has a lot of character there, and so, but we need to act fast. And so far, there was just, I think, one question here that will show data to date. Where and how would you want to see more mixed use development? So a pretty strong, so far, pretty strong sentiment that that commercial and mixed use could be embedded within neighborhoods on busier streets. Whoops, sorry. And then creating new mixed use nodes of development is second. And then in existing commercial areas by adding more uses to existing lots is third. And again, just some bullets, some high level, what we talked about in the focus group and roundtable, and we'll get into the details in our small groups, is corner stores. So Sunnyside and Highland in particular have a lot of these traditional corner stores that have been converted to residential. And so maybe looking at how we could allow and incentivize those structures to be converted back when they sell. Also looking at accessory businesses within the within the rules, you know, loosening rules to include more home business opportunities, especially with a lot of work from home opportunities, you know, being more common these days. We might want to look at loosening those rules to allow more commercial to be mixed into the neighborhoods. You know, of course, not real intensive commercial uses that generate a lot of traffic, but certainly more of those home business opportunities. Neighborhood nodes and former streetcar areas, encouraging adaptive reuse of commercial buildings, using the Main Street America approach. So economic vitality design promotion organization, there is an approach by the Main Street America organization, and I believe Rebecca brought this up. I think it's a good point, maybe using that approach as we think about our historic streetcar corridors. Active centers overlay is an option. It now exists in the zoning code and was put into place by Councilwoman Sandoval and her team in Tennyson. And could that be a tool that we might use? Providing buffer for street activation, so people want to see more outdoor dining. Preservation, we talked a lot about Scottish Village and Highland. What are some tools to use? It's a national historic district, but it's not locally designated. The Tejon corridor from the Chicano Latino study, so really looking hard at resources along Tejon and everywhere in that study, 38th as well. 32nd Avenue is important. 25th and Elliott is not designated. Maybe looking at design guidelines, like 5 Points is a cultural historic district, and it has design guidelines that speak to more of that cultural, not necessarily like historic preservation with a capital P. And then to deal with loss of commercial, looking at incentives to save existing commercial buildings. And we had a lot of conversations about how commercial is taxed at a lot higher rate than residential. And we think, you know, that could be the stimulus to why developers are putting in, you know, 100% residential, because it's allowed by zoning. And we might want to change that in some locations, but also just from a tax perspective, it makes it's a lot less onerous on the developer to put in residential. And so that is a quick overview. We are going to now break into small groups, and we're going to have this conversation in more detail. I've seen a lot of chat, but I can't read them all. Is there anything that we need to address as a group before?
I don't think so. I think Edson has been covering the chat, and me as well. So yeah, we could quickly break into groups. I think we dedicated 45 minutes. So Orvine, I'm really bad at math, so I can't give you an ETA on what that time is, but I'll do it in the breakout group. So 45 minutes. I will go ahead and start that right now.
Okay, thanks.
Chime in and
Okay, great tag team effort. I like it.
Rebecca.
Okay, great. Well, let's do report outs now. I think everyone's here. Does somebody want to volunteer their group to go first?
Oh, sure. Group one, who has no volunteer, but I'll go ahead and start. So Tim, Lorenzo, Renee, Bill. Renee was exempted from presenting because she's actually cooking dinner, so she's multitasking. But just real quick, a few ideas from group one. On the residential districts in terms of design character preservation, we talked about, and this is something that's been intriguing to me as well, but we talked about the notion of, are we getting to a point where we have to look at sort of fractionalized ownerships within existing homes? In other words, allowing 2 or 3 people to own a house instead of just one owner in a house. And is that maybe that could, the team could do some research on that, and maybe some of our neighborhoods in Northwest would be willing to pioneer that, if not the whole city. So that was, I think, a really interesting thought. The Sunnyside overlay, providing a useful framework for all the neighborhoods in terms of compatible design criteria. We should look at that. Real frustration with the city's fee structure, sort of one size fits all, regardless of the scale, particularly on residential development. This is a big disincentive to building small and to doing ADUs, and that should be something we can fix, guys. So the city's fee structure is something to look at. Those are just some highlights on residential. On the mixed use districts, we talked about what Councilman Sandoval was able to do on Tennyson in terms of an overlay that requires new development to have active ground floors in a commercial area. And we talked about the urgency, particularly on West 44th right now, that there's a real threat to losing some of the retail and some of the small stores over there. So that idea might work over there. And I'll just leave it there and just see if Tim, Lorenzo, Renee, Bill, Grace, if there's anything you want to add.
I'll add one thing. We talked about the loss of the small grocery stores, the bodegas, and we discussed that the only way to really bring them back is to figure out some way to incentivize people to develop those, because the profit margins are too low, apparently, since they've all left our neighborhood and been replaced by things that must gross a little bit more.
I'll go ahead and add, in the spirit of teamwork, that we really do need to look at the taxation situation, because it is really a problem, and it's part of the reason that developers don't want to put a commercial business on the ground floor, is that the taxation of a commercial business is different than residential, and it makes it more difficult for the numbers to work for them.
Okay, great. I can go second, and then Janie, if you want to do third. So we talked a lot and spent most of our time actually in the lower scale residential conversations, and got pulled back into this larger group when we were hitting the mixed use group. But when it came to the lower residential areas, I think the highlights were, I think there are some financing assistance when it comes to ADUs, but I think the thoughts are that sometimes it's not, even though you live in a neighborhood, you might be a working class family, but don't qualify at an income level to be able to actually have construct and qualify for those financing mechanisms to build an ADU in your backyard. So you're kind of fit in this, you're kind of trapped in this middle where you might be too poor to do it yourself, but too rich to qualify for kind of any subsidies to help to do that. So that's something that was mentioned. So that also kind of bled into about how we think about banking structures. We know that banks don't always look at things in a social, equitable way that allows people to make those housing decisions for themselves. So how do we kind of work with lenders or incentivize them in a creative way to kind of restructure their thinking around all of this? We also had some thoughts about the deconstruction ordinance. I think we all recognize that it's good for the environment, but I think if we add onto the costs, I think it'll help homeowners and developers kind of rethink their approach to what they might build and how they might build, whether it's recycling older materials. But then another interesting came up about, partnerships, about businesses that do this. How do we encourage businesses that help with deconstruction of older homes and recycling building materials? So that's an idea that came up. And then an additional idea that came up was about this idea of, we might have local and national historic districts, but there might be alternative zoning tools beyond that to help provide some additional design guidance, to be able to promote better outcomes within our older, more historic parts of the neighborhood. So that's something we covered. And then we quickly covered the commercial mixed use. And I think when I talked about the active centers overlay, I got a lot of head nods. And then that's when we got cut off here. So I'll wrap it up there. And then Mike and anyone else, if you guys have things to add on, feel free.
No, I was just going to add, there was in the earlier deck, there was a comment kind of about sort of the piecemeal nature of preservation, and just sort of whether there is should be less of that or more of that. And we had a couple comments on there. My comment was that there was recently a historic designation of River Drive in Jefferson Park, which I thought was great because it was one block, which seemed really appropriate and kind of uniform. And that seemed to me like a better way to look at a historic district rather than just isolating one specific house or trying to do an entire neighborhood. That was kind of a nicer middle ground for me.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so in my group, and I had Lexi, Trupti, Julie, Leslie, and we talked a lot about the same stuff that has been mentioned. There was real frustration about not wanting to have to think about a new overlay because they take 4 years, 10 years, and we don't have that time. And we know that, change happens so fast. And so whatever tools we use, we need to look at, some of those existing like active court, active centers. Can we just apply that to 44th and go and get that maybe even passed before, this plan is adopted? Or looking at Sunnyside's overlay as a template. Just trying to save time. And then I forced our group to talk a lot about Chaffee Park. It is, the least diverse in terms of housing types. It's all single family. My group cared less about how things look and more about just keeping people of color and people that have been in these neighborhoods, doing whatever we can. And doing, backflips to make these, people be able to stay in the neighborhood if they choose. Another thing that we talked about is like with Chaffee Park and not getting the unintended consequences of upzoning that have happened in other neighborhoods. But maybe, if that is the desire of the homeowner and they've been, say they've owned in Chaffee Park since 1980, but using those tools and helping them be able to upzone their own property and build the wealth that they need and deserve. Just finding a balance between, helping these, helping these homeowners build more wealth and having the tools available, and not thinking that upzoning is a bad thing because they might need that for generational wealth that could be useful for them. And we also talked mostly about the neighborhoods. We barely got into the mixed use stuff, but again, just like overlays now before it's too late, making the process quicker, getting the community invested early on, talked about commercial taxation, all the stuff that has already been discussed. So on the same page. Anything else from my group that you guys want to add, Lexi?
Yeah, it's tricky. We talked about the city making more direct investments of money into some of these things instead of thinking that market forces and, nonprofits and other groups can do it. Just, and I think that financing piece is a big one, but, what do we do about it? But yeah, the city making a bigger direct financial investment into the things that it prioritizes.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Kenny, do you mind sharing that presentation so we can go over concluding slides? please.
Yep.
Oh, 5-minute break. I didn't do that, but is everyone okay still proceeding? Or
Only if you let us go 5 minutes early.
Yeah.
yeah, or we could just, take that 5 minutes and just look at each other. So I did want to go over the meeting preference poll. Thank you everybody for filling that out. So I'll quickly kind of run through the results of it, because it's a little small, so I'm sure it's easier if I just talk through it. So we asked you, what meeting options you're most interested in. Only one person wanted to meet just virtually, and then following that was, continue to meet virtually for now, but reevaluate later. 4 people continue to meet virtually, but have separate optional in-person meetings to get to know each other. 6 people, and then alternate between virtual and in-person meetings, 11 people. So vast majority there. And then switch to only in-person meetings, just 3. So just knowing that, 6 plus 11 plus 3 equals 20. I can do the math. That's the vast majority where people feel comfortable meeting in person. And since we have a majority of people that would like to alternate between virtual and in-person meetings, I think that's where we're going to go with for now, is to figure out an alternative plan where every other month we meet in person versus online. So we will figure that out logistically, what that means in terms of, finding space for actually us to meet in person and giving you guys advanced notification on that. But I think one key thing we wanted to prioritize and make sure that we're monitoring is attendance. And so we know that virtual meetings offer the flexibility. And with the summer coming up, with vacations and nice weather, if we start to see that attendance sharply drops at our in-person meetings, we might just have to go back to virtual component of it, just so, just for attendance reasons, because we want all voices here at the table. We want to hear from everyone here today. So that's kind of direction we're leaning towards, and we'll provide kind of more details on that moving forward. I did want to highlight some of the open comments that were in here. So I think someone mentioned about potentially doing optional meet and greet at the first in-person meeting. So like, our meetings are 2 hours, but maybe we have a 30-minute optional meet and greet at the beginning of that for people to just kind of get some face time and introduce themselves. So that was an idea that was brought up, and we'll kind of contemplate that. And people like the opportunities for tours, but maybe not necessarily separate options, but more integrated and are part of the meetings themselves. And then someone mentioned about concerns around attendance for in-person meetings, and COVID is still lingering, right? So we know that COVID tends to drop off a little bit during the summer, but it picks back up during the fall. So, it might be an idea that maybe once we transition into the fall, we monitor COVID a little bit more and be respectful for, to everyone's kind of preferences and such. So, yeah, so that's kind of that. So next steps, we decided on all the alternate meetings, and we'll let you know how that move forward. Yeah. Anyone has questions regarding all that?
I just wanted to ask real quick, how many people total are on the steering committee, not counting like the facilitators, and just what's the online participation been like lately? Like, it seems tonight is maybe a smaller group than normal, or just kind of what have the attendance patterns been like recently?
Yeah, so it's been on and off, and we've had pretty good attendance from most people in the committee. I think we've had a few members that if they chose not to show up, they chose that kind of upfront at the beginning of the process, and bled into maybe 6 to 7 straight meetings of not showing up. But we have been monitoring that, and that's why we've had replacements on this committee. So not everyone, were replaced because of attendance issues. Some people voluntarily took the summer out of the committee because, they're busy with other things, and we have to respect that. But attendance has been pretty good for online meetings, and, for people that have been showing up, you know, they might send me an email and say they're showing up late or have kind of a one-time conflict. And so most of committee members have been pretty good about that. But in total, I would have to run the numbers. I think it's about 20 to 23
21.
members. Sorry?
There's 21, and
21.
the last few meetings we've had about 70% of the folks actually
Okay.
come to the meetings.
Yeah, so Edson is monitoring all that in the background, so I should actually just direct that question to you. But yeah,
Thank you for that.
no problem.
Better than most DPS high schools. If that makes anyone feel better.
I have a question. If we do in person, but someone has to be out of town, but could it attend remotely? Do we have a capability to have a remote
So
possibility to join?
that has been a question that's been tossed around the city. Unfortunately, I have to say no. It's just we haven't had success with conducting hybrid meetings. One, because we usually meet, if we do meet, we meet in the neighborhood places that are available to us, like schools, and
Okay.
a lot of them don't have that capability to kind of make that productive for everybody. Great. All right, I think we could move to the next slide then. So I just wanted to highlight some of the upcoming meetings. So we'll, as it has been mentioned, we'll have our Quig Newton resident focus workshop on the 26th. On June 9th is that follow-up meeting on the Sunnyside industrial area. We've invited more property owners and business owners to the table. So that will take on the 9th from 5 to 7 at Aslan Recreation Center. Another thing I actually didn't mention on here was I was invited by Leslie to attend the Jefferson Park block party on June 11th on Saturday. So I'll be there as well, got tabling for a few hours. And then
everybody's invited.
Everyone, yeah.
Everybody's invited. June 11th, Saturday, party on West 25th and Federal. I'll buy you a drink.
Put the link in the chat, Leslie.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the Federal Boulevard Bid Facebook page. You guys, come on, show up. We're gonna have a good time.
So yeah, so that's there for everyone to swing by. Should be a good time, and I will be there. Regarding next steps for steering committee meeting, the next topic of will be just kind of really regurgitating everything we've heard from the phase 2 process and just reporting out on, you know, what have we learned from all these events we've been having with the public and online surveys. So that would be an opportunity to just kind of summarize key things we've heard and discuss that. So that's all of it for just announcements. Any questions on all of that? Okay.
No questions. Can I just do a quick follow-up? Because I think it's relevant. One of the things we're celebrating on June 11th is what is coming for West 25th is some bond money that we were awarded in the 2017 bond. We're going to narrow our street on West 25th. We're going to continue to allow some parking and some traffic, but we're reclaiming a lot of that asphalt for human beings and places to hang out. And so I hope that you guys come join. I hope that you come see what that looks like. It's not appropriate for every block everywhere, but we've really over asphalted Denver. And so I hope that you come and look at this as a way to, as we have come in near Northwest Denver from a place that's very owned by cars to reclaiming some of that for human beings. So thank you. And thank you for everyone for your time tonight. And thank you CPD for being there and Dottie for being there on June 11th. Oh, Los Mocos Cheddis are playing. Did I not mention that? Excuse me.
No.
That's the best part. Forget my drinks and my talk about CPD and bond money.
All right, we'll end on that note then. But yeah, thank you everybody for attending, and we will see you next month and maybe at the block party. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.